Welcome, everyone, to the Fandom Podcast Network special presentation of Time Warp 1983. Movies and pop culture. Everything in 1983 is celebrating its 30th anniversary. And this is part 4. We're discussing the month of July of 1983, all the movies and all the pop culture during that time. And I'd like to, first of all, welcome my brother from another mother, and of course, co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, Mr. Kyle Wagner. What's going on, buddy?
Oh, I don't know. I think I took a left turn at the wrong time slot. I'm feeling a little off tonight. It could be just the heat outside because we are talking about the hotness of the summer movies of 1983.
It's true. It is true. And for us, we're actually recording this in July, so we're feeling the heat right now. But we can't move forward, Kyle, until we get the queen of movie food to join us back here again on Time Warp 1983. Lacee Hold. How are you?
Hello, I'm well. How are you?
Doing really, really good. You excited? Talk a little Time Warp again?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. All right, guys. Here we are. This is 1983, 40th anniversary. We've got some movies we're going to be discussing here in the month of July. This is during the summer months of July. Really, really excited. Of course, the fun thing about Time Warp that we like to do, guys, is that we like to talk about films also that we haven't seen and maybe convince ourselves to maybe watch them if maybe one of us hasn't seen it or none of us have seen it, but we want to let you know, even though we haven't seen them, what was out, and maybe you have. You can let us know how they are, or we can challenge ourselves and talk about, well, with the description and the trivia, maybe we should check it out. But going forward, though, like I said, this is July of 1983. We have a little time travel to do, but before we do, guys, 1983 is the year of the sex comedies. There was a lot of them. We've already discussed some of them, right? And I think, without teasing it just yet, I think the best 1983 sex comedy came out in July. I'm just teasing that right now. So we'll get into that a little bit. All right, guys. As I teased here, we have a DeLorean here that has a little hot tub in there. Why do I have that up, guys? Well, because we need to take a step back into time. Let's fuel up that DeLorean with a flux capacitor, slingshot around the sun aboard a captured Klingon bird of prey, take a step in that blue police box or phone booth, or step into that quantum leap accelerator, or my favorite, throw in a little Chernobyl into your hot tub time machine. As we travel back to 1983, we're going to remind you what was happening in pop culture, sports, politics, television, and of course, the movies of 1983. All right,
Hey,
guys,
Kevin,
it's vintage.
I forgot to tell you about the party I had in the DeLorean hot tub. I forgot to clean up afterwards. So if we have some time bumps in this, just saying.
Okay, all right. Consider you guys warned. As I mentioned, 80s was the teen sex comedies. We'll be getting back to that. But what has happened in 1983? Well, back in 1983, of course, what things cost. You know, stuff was a lot cheaper. I don't know if you know this, Lacee, back in 1983. Toothpaste, sneakers, New Balance, Kraft cheese was 69 cents a package. You know, coffee was like $1.99 a pound, a can. A lot of popular songs. We'll get into that a little bit later. We got some average cost. We always like to roll that out there. Again, we have to remind you about gas. Gas was about 96 cents a gallon.
I think the most important part of that is that Kraft cheese was actually considered cheese back then. It's not.
Yeah, right. Was it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope they started like having to realize like Cheese Whiz wasn't real cheese, right?
Right. Yeah.
Hey, Kevin, can I bring up something here? Because I'm looking at the back in 1983 thing on our notes here.
Yeah.
I did not realize until I just looked at this that Fraggle Rock was the first ever HBO original program.
Yeah. I'm looking back and I'm thinking, yeah, because obviously they had movies and such, but they had to get into the original programming somewhere. So one of the earliest ones I remember, and I would love to find the entire series, and they're not showing it on HBO anymore, is Dream On. Remember Dream On, Kyle? You remember that, Lacee? Dream On
yeah.
with Brian Ben.
Well, I remember not being allowed to watch it.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was definitely an R-rated comedy. It was
Yeah.
a half-hour show, and he would have these flashbacks to old TV series that would, incorporate in his everyday life. I love that show. I thought it was great.
I was just thinking the jump from Fraggle Rock to Oz to The Sopranos to the House of Dragons. Who would have thought?
Yeah, no, I know. Yep. All right, guys, let's get into some world news here. Of course, President was Ronald Reagan. George H.W. Bush was Vice President. Chief Justice Warren E. Burger. Speaker of the House, of course, Tip O'Neill. In July of 1983, Diana Ross's concert at the Great Lawn of New York City's Central Park, attended by 800,000 fans, is cut short by a massive lightning storm. And the world's first dedicated hospital ward for HIV/AIDS patients opens at the San Francisco General Hospital. There's a little bit of news there in July. Because you were born in 1983, you'd be 40 years old. Here are some celebrities that were born in 1983. Michelle Branch, singer-songwriter. Anya Ora, an actress. Devon Nixon, actor. Jason William Adams, actor. Jennifer Berry, beauty pageant title holder and Miss America in 2006. Tribe Byers, actor and singer. Jenny Barber, actress and singer. And Caitlin Black, actress. Michelle Branch is really the only person I recognize from this particular list here.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was like, I didn't recognize a single other person except for Michelle Branch.
Yeah, me neither. We had a few deaths of note, too, in 1983. Guys, we had Robert A. Lewis. He was one of the Enola Gay pilots, armed air forces serving the Pacific Theater during World War II. Of course, the Enola Gay was one of the planes that dropped one of the atom bombs on Japan. He died. Also, we had actor David Niven. He passed away as well. So there you go. He died July 29th. We have some 83 technology here, guys. We had Microsoft Word 1.1. Microsoft announces Word, originally called Multi-Tool Word, in a marketing blitz. Microsoft distributed 450,000 discs containing a demonstrated version of its Word program in the November issue of PC World magazine, giving readers a chance to try the program for free. It competed with the WordPerfect for a market share as a word processing program, and it was not until Microsoft Word for Windows was introduced in 1999 that it became a global standard, Kyle.
Yeah, I'm looking at this, and we still can't escape Times Roman.
This is true. Also, I guess for music buffs here, guys, we had the single rack MIDI setup, musical instrument digital interface, MIDI, is introduced for the first North American music manufacturers. That's the NAMM show in Los Angeles. MIDI is an industrial standard electronics interface that links computers with electronic musical instruments. There you go.
Okay.
We're also getting some of the first wireless phones, the Motorola Dynatac 8000X, otherwise known as the brick phone, Kyle.
It's the Zach Morris special.
Or as I call it,
wait. Would you say, Lacee?
It's the Zach Morris special.
Yes.
I was thinking either that or I call it the Gordon Gecko.
The Gordon Gecko, yes.
That's fair. That's fair.
Also, we're still vintage, 83 guys. We got some products. We got the G-Shock, a line of watches manufactured by Japanese electronic company Casio. Very big deal. 200-meter water resistance, alarm, digital display. Oh, man, these were everywhere, guys. Very, very popular, Kyle. Did you have a G-Shock?
I had a G-Shock, but one of the things I remember was in the advertising campaign for the G-Shock, it was somebody who played in the NHL, and they advertised him slap-shotting it into the goalie's glove.
I remember that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Also, one of my favorite things, the Choco Taco was invented in Philadelphia in 1983 by Alan Drazen and Senior Vice President of Jack and Jill Ice Cream Company. It was first rolled out in 1984 when it became popular in mobile vending trucks. Now, guys, I didn't realize it came out this early. I didn't have or know anything about the Choco Taco until I want to say the early to mid 90s when I was dating a girl, and I think we got it at Taco Bell. They were selling them there, and I thought these were the greatest things ever. They are delicious. Did you guys know about them back then, Lacee?
Oh yeah, they were on the ice cream truck that would come around.
I don't remember those.
Yeah,
I was always gravitating towards the bomb pops, though, the red, white, and blue big bomb pops. Those are my favorites.
Yep.
Well,
Kyle, what about you? Choco Tacos?
I think I heard of them before, but they became huge when Taco Bell started selling them, which they don't anymore, which is a crime. But yeah, I was like you, Kevin. I was going for the bomb pops.
Well, the reason why I heard about it was because in Richmond, Virginia, Good Humor Briars promoted it in 1996 as America's coolest taco. See what they did there? See what they did there? Coolest taco.
Yeah.
Now, the other item, guys, made more famous from Elaine from Seinfeld, the contraceptive sponge combines barrier and spermicide methods to prevent conception. Sponges can provide contraception for multiple acts of intercourse over a 24-hour period, but cannot be reused beyond the time or once removed. Sponges' effectiveness is 91% if used perfectly by women who never gave birth, and 80% if used perfectly by women who have given at least one birth. Of course, remember Elaine said, I don't know if he's sponge worthy.
That just goes to show that I did not watch Seinfeld nearly as often as I thought I watched Seinfeld.
You missed out on a really good episode because she was in a very big quandary of whether or not this new boyfriend she wanted to waste a sponge on. Because sponges were, going out of stock or production, and so she didn't want to waste her remaining sponges on a guy that wasn't sponge worthy.
Okay.
Hence why it's funny.
Decisions. Okay.
All right, guys. We got some popular toys here in the 80s. We always have to share this stuff. First, we have the Little Tykes Treehouse, manufactured Little Tykes for $78.99. We also had the Mountain Fortress. Bi-level Mountain Fortress set includes multiple figures and vehicles and has a kid-powered elevator. I don't know about you, Kyle, but I think this was a budget G.I. Joe or Cobra base, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do have a question, Kevin. In the Little Tykes Treehouse, are we sure that's not Punky Brewster?
Looks a lot like her. Yes. For those of you on the audio podcast, there's a cute little girl getting ready to slide down. She does look like a young Punky Brewster. So make sure you check out the video version of this podcast. We also have the pedal Jaguar car for kids, priced at $49.99. Slide behind this wheel of this sleek Jaguar convertible. I think it's sleek. Pedal rods adjust with child's growth. The hood, trunk, and doors open. There's a simulated CB microphone, and there is a simulated rear view mirror. Also, guys, My Little Pony. This picture here is actually from Kyle's personal collection. Thank you for supplying that, Kyle. They were $4.99 each. What was your favorite? Did you choose Bell, Blossom, Cotton Candy, Snuzzy, Butterscotch, or Minty, Kyle?
None of the above. But you do have a very special My Little Pony.
I do. Yes. My daughter went through her My Little Pony phase, and she was giving one a custom hair job, and she didn't like it. And she threw it away. She was going to throw it away. I said, well, hold on. You can redo your My Little Pony into a much, much, much better version of what you had before. And so I did the little Raider My Little Pony right there. Check that out. How awesome is that? She's got the little back, neck tattoos there, little Raider things. How cool is that? Yeah. You impressed by that, Lacee? Huh?
I was never I wanted a BB gun. Like, I didn't do like dolls and something. That was my sister. She had like hundreds of them. They were just everywhere. And she would like to take the heads off and stick them on other, like she would Frankenstein them. Yeah.
There was a lot of My Little Pony abuse. I do know that.
Now, Kevin, on that Jaguar with inflation now, that's about a $30,000 car?
Yes, from $49.99 to $30,000. Yes, definitely. All right, guys. Next, we've got music of 1983. Here's some pictures of some albums that were very popular that came out in 1983, including Kiss, Lick It Up, Michael Jackson, Thriller, Def Leppard, Pyromania, Police, Synchronicity, Metallica, Kill 'Em All. We got Bowie had an album, of course. Motley Crue, Shout the Devil, and Madonna released an album as well. But what we like to do is go over a couple of songs here, but I got some music news first. Simon and Garfunkel begin their North American summer tour in Akron, Ohio on the 19th. On the 21st, already mentioned, of course, the Diana Ross thing, but 25th, Metallica releases their debut album, Kill 'Em All, since hailed as the groundbreaking release for the burgeoning thrash metal genre. A lot of people give Metallica the credit they deserve for being the first thrash metal band. And of course, really, when you talk about full-on metal bands, they are at the top. Do we have any Metallica fans here besides me? Anybody? No?
Yes.
Yes. Wow. Lacey, really a Metallica fan?
Hey, now, I like my hair metal.
Nice.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
I will say that I also do still I have a first pressing LP of Thriller that's still in the plastic and is framed.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Kyle.
Yeah.
Was it not Kiss Lick It Up, the first album after they removed the makeup?
It was either Lick It Up or the prior one, but yes, this was right after that they did remove the makeup. Yes, and I'll be honest with you, this is when I got into Kiss because they were starting to blow up on TV, and Heaven's on Fire was one of my favorite songs. And yes, it was cheesy, but I loved it. It's great. But it did get me exposed to early Kiss, and I went back and did listen to them, and I got a chance to see them in and out of makeup later on. I've seen them twice. That's pretty cool.
Nice.
All right, guys. One other news too. July 29th, Friday Night Videos is broadcast for the first time on NBC. The other alternate to seeing videos on TV other than MTV. I did catch those quite time to time. What about you guys?
I did. I remember it lasted forever because there was always two shows that were on NBC that always like just stood out even later in the 80s. Because it's like, how do these fit? It was Friday Night Videos and George Michael Sports Machine because we obviously had MTV and ESPN. But yeah, Friday Night Videos lasted for a lot longer than I think it had any right lasting.
Yeah, and appreciate that. Okay, guys, we'd like to go into the Billboard 100 for 1983. We'd like to pick a few to discuss here. And the list that I have here at number 50 through 40, we've got Too Shy by Kajagoogoo, The Girl Is Mine by Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney, Dirty Laundry by Don Henley, Truly by Lionel Richie, Always Something There to Remind Me by Naked Eyes, Tell Her About It by Billy Joel, Stand Back by Stevie Nicks, Allentown by Billy Joel, Stray Cat Strut by the Stray Cats, 1999 by Prince, and We've Got Tonight by Kenny Rogers and Sheena Easton. The one song I'm having trouble remembering is The Girl Is Mine. Can someone sing that here to remind me how that goes?
No, because when I think of Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney, I always go Say, Say, Say.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Do you remember that song, Lacey?
I do, but I don't sing, so it's not going to happen.
Okay. Well, Lacey, which one's a
bad
good
idea.
song?
Asking me to sing is not going to happen.
Name a few of these songs that are some of your favorites in this group.
Well, I'm a big Billy Joel fan, so that's part of it. I would also say out of this group, I would also say always something there to remind me. And Stray Cat Strut, of course, is I love the Stray Cats. So
yeah. What about you, Colin? What are some of your favorites in this?
Always Something There to Remind Me has got one of the best song hooks in
Always Something There to Remind Me.
Billy Joel, Tell Her About It is one of his all-time classics. And
yeah,
I mean, Kenny Rogers and Sheena Easton, We've Got Tonight. That was all over the place at that point.
Yeah. Too Shy by Kajagoogoo, I love too. 1999 by Prince was great. Yeah, we're getting into the good stuff here. That was number 50 through 40.
I don't even recognize Too Shy by what is it? Kajagoogoo?
Too shy, hush, hush. I want. Come on.
Okay.
Nailed it again. Nailed it again. How good was I, guys?
That was fantastic. Yeah.
Our listenership just plummeted, by the way.
What's that? What's that, Kyle?
I said our listenership just plummeted, by the way.
Oh, no. It just tripled. That's what it did. Yeah. All right, guys. Next, we've got the primetime TV shows of 1983. Of course, we'll be talking about just a few at a time. We've got 16 through 11 here. We've got Fall Guy, which averaged about close to 20 million viewers. After that was After MASH, just a little over. We had TV's bloopers and practical jokes on NBC. Sharing the number 12 spot, we had the ABC Sunday night movie and the ABC Monday night movie. And 11, we had Knots Landing. Kyle, what were a couple of your favorites from this?
Oh, can never go wrong with The Fall Guy.
Yeah, buddy. And there's a remake, right, coming out with Ryan Gosling, if I remember correctly.
And
right?
Mark Wahlberg.
Oh, so good. So
good. The disaster that was after MASH, because that did not last long. And you know what? Ed McMahon with TV bloopers and practical jokes. I mean,
yeah.
That
Dick Clark.
became
Ed McMahon and Dick Clark both were
yeah,
doing it. Yeah.
That became a staple for a very long time.
Yeah, we watch that all the time. What about you, Lacey? What are some of your favorites here?
Honestly, The Fall Guy's the only one I really remember. The Fall Guy was my favorite. Matter of fact, for the very long time, I had that as the song as my ringtone. When I first got the first iPhone I got, that actually you could do your own ringtones.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love it.
But you said they're doing a remake. Is it a film or is it a
film?
Okay,
it's a film.
Okay.
Yeah. Looking for it. I hope they do something similar with that theme song, because that theme song was great. It was great. So, yeah.
Heather Thomas.
Yes, Heather Thomas. Speaking of TV shows, guys, wait, hold on. I need to think about Heather Thomas for a second here. Okay, I'm done. All right.
Yep, we're good.
All right, guys. We had now, of course, these are the summer months, so there's not a lot of new stuff coming out in the summer months. So we did have a couple of shows. As I mentioned, we had Friday Night Videos. We also had Reading Rainbow on PBS debuting on July 11th. We also had some shows that were ending this month, and that was The Crystal Cube, which apparently also started in 1983. I don't know what that is. But Chips finally came to an ending from 1977. It started, and Taxi started in 1978. Also came to an ending here in July as well. All right. We also had some movie celebrity film debuts. Now, these are names I remember. We have Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio from Scarface. We had Andrew McCarthy in Class. Kelly McGillis and Reuben Rubin. We had Peter McRobbie Zelig. Julio Oscar Macheso. I don't know who he is. Gugassi. I don't know. Matthew Modine and Baby It's You. Tachina Arnold in The Brass Ring. And Rick Moranis in Strange Brew. So young, so young. All right, guys. We are here, of course, to talk about the movies of 1983. And we are going to go directly, hold on here, in July, of course. And the first one, guys, is Burt Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson. And I actually have a copy of it right here. Stroker Ace, right here. I wasn't sure how I was going to watch this, guys. I couldn't find it for free anywhere. And then I was at a place and it was for $1, and I picked it up and watched it. Of course, directed by Hal Needham. Stroker Ace is a championship NASCAR driver, is standing at the top of his career, but is getting fed up with having to do what he's told. In between rebelling against his sponsor, a fried chicken chain's promotional gimmicks like making him dress up as a giant chicken suit, he spends the rest of his movie trying to bed the buxom Pembroke, Lonnie Anderson. As I mentioned, Hal Needham, Kyle, of course, we know him as the director of one of our favorite films in the first G.I. Joe movie, Megaforce. Stars Burt Reynolds, Ned Beatty, Jim Nabors, and, of course, Lonnie Anderson. Before we get into our thoughts about this film, Kyle, why don't you give us some trivia, please?
Yeah, because there's some interesting trivia on this, because this movie actually made Burt Reynolds miss a film that would have been, this is what we call a sliding doors moment, because Burt Reynolds famously turned down a role in terms of endearment for this film, saying it was the biggest regret of his career. He had made a verbal commitment to Hal Needham to do this by the time he was offered the role of Garrett Breedlove in that film. But said in hindsight, Needham could have waited, since the world was not clamoring for another Reynolds car chase picture. This one actually surprised me, because I could have sworn there was more of these, but this is the only real live action movie that Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson made together, though they both did do voice work for the animated picture All Dogs Go to Heaven. Reynolds and Anderson formed relationships which led to a 5-year marriage between 1988 and 1993. A marriage that began 5 years after this movie was made. Reportedly, their messy divorce drew much publicity from the media. The two first met on the set of the Merv Griffin show in 1981, but did not start dating until 82. This movie was made and released in 83. The fifth action car stunt comedy between the team of Hal Needham and Burt Reynolds. The earlier ones, Smokey and the Bandit, Cannonball Run, Hooper, Smokey and the Bandit 2. Burt Reynolds once said in 1982, about a year before this picture, that he wasn't going to make any more car chase movies. You lied, you lied, you lied.
Well, it's a car race movie, not a car chase movie. But yes, it's him in cars. So let's start with you, Lacey. Have you seen Stroker Ace?
I loved Stroker Ace. Now I didn't see it when I was 10 because not appropriate. But later on I saw it, and I went through like a phase where I went back and I kind of did the deep dive into Burt Reynolds' full history, full catalog. And it's proudly on my shelf. It does not hold up to today's standards, but it is a lovely walk down memory lane. We'll just put it that way.
Gotcha. Kyle, have you seen Stroker Ace?
I have seen Stroker Ace. Stroker Ace was one of those movies that early on in the old days of Turner Broadcasting System, TBS, was in the regular rotation. I mean, it was probably aired 2 to 3 times a week in the early days of TBS.
And it had terrible dubbing for the cuss words. Like he'd be like, "What the duck?" Or whatever. It was fun.
I've never seen it before, to be honest with you guys. And if I hadn't found this thing on DVD last week for $1, I would have been asking you guys about it. I ended up watching it. I thought it was okay. What I did find interesting, and I'm not a big NASCAR fan, but it seems to me that NASCAR itself was really kind of starting to get more popular during the 80s. It seems like Formula One was always the biggest thing. Because I remember the movie Le Mans. My dad and I loved that movie, or he loved it, and I would watch it with him and stuff like this. But this was like early NASCAR stuff, so I found that kind of interesting. Even though when I lived in Atlanta, you cannot get away from NASCAR. But I was kind of more curious about how Burt Reynolds and of course Lonnie Anderson were going to be in this film, and I actually enjoyed Jim Nabors and Burt Reynolds in this. They had some funny moments there. Parker Stevenson kind of playing the I don't know. I was getting like vibes of whatchamacallit, the Tom Cruise race movie, like
Days of Thunder.
Yeah, because there's a scene where like they were like racing on tables or something like that, and he's trying to get back at Parker Stevenson, and he's like the competing guy and all that kind of stuff. So there was some similarities. I was wondering if they had seen that film and did that, but it was okay. I don't know if I'm going to keep the film and rewatch it, but it was entertaining. So
I have a question real quick. You mentioned Parker Stevenson. Can we almost call him the chameleon of the 1980s? Because there wasn't a type of film he didn't do.
I'm having trouble placing him in movies, Kyle, so you're going to have to shout some out and remind me.
That's why he's the chameleon.
Yeah.
You won't recognize him in anything.
Okay, well, I couldn't remember anything he's been in, to be honest with you. Ned Beatty, I've seen him in a lot.
He was also a guest star as a bad guy on like every car show there was. Every show, he had a guest spot in, like it was like Knight Rider.
Are you talking about Parker Stevenson or Ned Beatty?
Yeah. Oh, Parker Stevenson.
Okay. He
had guest spots all over TV where he always played like the odd bad guys. To me.
All right. All right, guys, the next film I have not seen. I tried to see it was streaming for free somewhere, and I could not find it. And this is called Deadly Force. When the cops won't and the courts can't, Stoney Cooper will give you justice when nothing else will do. Director Paul Aaron stars Wings Hauser when they were trying to make him a thing, Joyce Ingalls and Paul Shinar. Stoney Cooper is a former Los Angeles police officer at a low point in his life. Kicked off the force because of his anti-authority attitude, he now ekes out a living as a freelancer in New York, All this changes when the daughter of an old friend is killed by a serial killer terrorizing LA. Although most nobody in his old hometown is happy to see him, Cooper pledges to bring the killer to justice before any more innocent people die. Kyle, what do we have on trivia for Deadly Force?
This was the second and final theatrical film collaboration of actor Wings Hauser and producer Sandy Howard. The movies are Vice Squad in 1982 and Deadly Force in 1983. Both pictures had 2-word titles and were made in consecutive back-to-back years.
Now, Kyle, remember we did Vice Squad last year. I actually found that on DVD and watched it, and it was a very gritty LA crime drama. I thought it was pretty good, and I feel like they were trying to make Hauser a thing here with then doing this film as well.
Yeah, and in fact, when you talk about making Hauser a thing, producer Sandy Howard had just worked with Hauser on Vice Squad and was impressed with his ability and charisma. Howard immediately searched for a vehicle for his star and found it with this film. Howard hoped it would be the beginning of a Dirty Harry-like franchise, but plans for more Stoney Cooper films never materialized. Yeah, Wings Hauser, they tried hard for about a 3-year period, and it just never took.
Yeah.
But his son looks just like him. When I saw the picture for this, I was like, oh my gosh, is that Cole Hauser? And I realized that it was Wing. I was like, oh wow, I don't think I'd ever connected Wings Hauser and Cole Hauser before.
Has anyone seen this film?
I feel like I have, like back in the day, but nothing recent. No.
Yeah, when I look up IMDb for Wings, the first movies that show up for him is, of course, Vice Squad, Tough Guys Don't Dance in '87, Rubber in 2010, and The Insider in 1999. Yeah, and they've done a lot of he did The Young and the Restless for a while. He did 14 episodes of that. And he kind of comes in and out of B movie films and some episodic television stuff, but he never became a thing, and they were trying to do that here. I still want to see this movie because I did like him in Vice Squad. I thought that was kind of a fun thing.
Didn't he switch over to being a stuntman for a while?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it would have been interesting though if Sam Peckinpah did do this. But Sam Peckinpah was on his way out health-wise on this, so yeah. All right, guys. Next we have, and I'm kind of curious to get your guys' thoughts on this. We have Staying Alive. This movie made a lot of money, made $126 million at the time. Now, I forgot to ask our friend Jen here. She wants to know how much that money is nowadays. So, Jen, if you're listening to this right now, I'm going to ask you to do a conversion into how much that would be now, and I can call it the Jen movie inflation rate, and we'll do that because I'm sure
Genflation rate.
Genflation rate, yeah. But back then, 126 million for a film is pretty good. Of course, this movie is Staying Alive. Tony Manero knows the old days are over, but nobody's going to tell him he can't feel that good again. John Travolta. 5 years later, of course, after Saturday Night Live, Tony Manero's Saturday Night Fever, not Alive, is still burning. Now he's strutting towards his biggest challenge yet, succeeding as a dancer on Broadway stage. The director is Sylvester Stallone. Writers also include Sylvester Stallone. Stars John Travolta, Cynthia Rhodes, Finola Hughes. Kyle, give us some trivia on Staying Alive.
Okay, first, I need a minute because Fiona Hughes. I just need a minute to process. Just like the
hot.
Yes. And accent.
Yes, accent good.
John Travolta claimed his favorite director to work with was Sylvester Stallone. He said Stallone knew how to make him look the best on screen. Of course, as Kevin mentioned, this was one of 1983's most successful films at the box office. Under Stallone's supervision, Travolta spent 5 months doing rigorous training to develop a dancer's physique for this film, losing 20 pounds in the process. Travolta suggested Stallone to producer Robert Stigwood after Travolta saw Rocky III while on vacation in Hawaii. Travolta loved the film and told Stigwood that if he could pull off sequels that well, he would be the ideal choice for directing this film. However, John Travolta originally turned down $10 million to star in this film.
That's a lot of money back in those days. A lot of money, yeah. Okay, guys, I got a controversial take on this film, but let's start with you, Lacey. Have you seen Staying Alive?
I I will be 50 at the end of this month. I'm a film major. I have a degree in screenwriting. I have never had the interest to see this film. I've tried. I've gotten like 3 minutes into it each time, and I'm like, nope. I don't know. I just can't. There's something. Maybe it's the headband. I don't know. I can't do it. I don't know what it is.
I get you. I get you. I'm with you there until I saw it. Kyle, your thoughts on Staying Alive? Have you seen it?
It's been a while since I have seen it. It's not something I'm planning on revisiting, but the things I remember from it is probably physically the best Travolta ever looked, thanks to Stallone and the training he did for this. Also, too, I just remember it was one of the Broadway show that they were in was one of the weirdest looking Broadway shows I have ever seen in my life.
It's very 80s.
Very definitely 80s. very 80s. This always stands out to me. It's like one of those movies. Did we really ask for or need a sequel?
Yeah, that is debatable. Yes.
What was the Broadway show they were doing in the
very debatable. Okay, guys. So I was curious in seeing this because for a couple of reasons, and I'll be completely honest with you. I was curious because I had seen Saturday Night Fever a year or two ago because I was curious about it. I think I was listening to a podcast, Kyle, and they were talking about it, and so I wanted to go back and revisit it. And I came to the conclusion too that Saturday Night Fever is not a nice movie. It's kind of nasty. It gets overshadowed by probably the soundtrack, which is fantastic, the Bee Gees, and also the dancing that we get to see John Travolta do in the disco era. And so I was curious, like, I've never seen Staying Alive. I need to check this out. But also, too, I want to see it, too, because I wanted to see Cynthia Rhodes, and I wanted to see Finola Hughes in it. For those of you that don't know, Cynthia Rhodes, a lot of people remember her from Dirty Dancing. She was Penny Johnson. She was the one that got pregnant. Ooh. She was also in Flashdance, and she was also one of the Flashdance doubles that doubled for the lead actress in that as well. And she also was the lead co-star in one of the sci-fi flicks I like with Tom Selleck called Runaway, which came out in '84. Big fan of that film. And she's also famous for marrying Richard Marx and having a long relationship with her. But I got to tell you guys, so I actually like this movie. And I liked it because it was in the 80s. It had 80s style. It was also in 80s New York, which I really, really liked. And it was, I actually like it better than Saturday Night Fever because it's much more entertaining film, to be honest with you. It had 80s music, had, of course, 80s setting. And I always like 80s New York movies. I love it when they film stuff in the 80s because the 70s was really dirty and nasty. And 80s was still like that way, but things were the 80s. Me generation was coming in. Cocaine was building everything.
Everything turned pink and teal and neon.
Exactly. And I love that as a background. But the thing that I liked about this film is that Tony. And I thought it was a really cool, if it was a conscious decision to have Sylvester Stallone direct John Travolta, because Tony the character Tony that John Travolta plays in Saturday Night Fever, he's really self-absorbed and he treats women like shit, let's be honest, okay? But what I like about this film is that the women give it back to him. They don't put up with this crap. And he gets put in his place and he learns from it. And I like that he also has this drive to be part of a Broadway. And there's some, actually, if you're a big fan of dance, and my wife is, she's not a huge fan of this film, but she likes the dance sequences. And Finola Hughes plays a love interest, obviously, and she's an accomplished dancer, and she puts those to test here in this film. But I like the fact that the women are strong in this film. They don't put up with this shit, and he gets put in his place, and he learns from that. And I think it's worth seeing for that. And I think that gets overlooked, to be perfectly honest with you. So my controversial take is I like Staying Alive better than Saturday Night Fever.
Fair.
All right. Okay. All right, guys. Next film we have is Class. Okay, this is a comedy made about a little over $21 million in the theater. Good news is Jonathan's having his first affair. The bad news is she's his roommate's mother. Starring Rob Lowe, Jacqueline Bisset, Andrew McCarthy, and Cliff Robertson. A young man in a private school spends one crazy night out, but soon realizes the woman he hooked up with is not who he expected. As I mentioned, director is Louis John Carlino. And so, guys, I'd never seen this film before. I was kind of surprised about it, and I believe this was McCarthy's first film, or at least leading film. And it's streaming for free somewhere. I forgot. It's been a couple months since I've seen it. I really enjoyed this film. But Kyle, before we go further, please give us some trivia.
Well, let's just say that Rob Lowe and Andrew McCarthy were living up to the brat part of the Brat Pack, the way they acted on this film. In a 2013 interview, when Virginia Madsen was asked about this role, she refused to talk about it. All she said was, those guys were assholes. They were really shitty to me. It was bad memories.
I was kind of bummed to hear this, and it doesn't surprise me, but I'll tell you right now, Virginia Madsen looked awesome and really cute in this film.
Yeah, she always looks awesome. So, according to 80s Rewind website, apparently at one point during filming, Rob Lowe allegedly threatened to quit the movie unless he was allowed to appear in a scene totally naked in a bathtub full of baked beans. The director refused, but did manage to finally lure Lowe back to the set.
That's a weird request. I'm just going to go on record and say that.
I'm guessing there might have been cocaine involved with that request.
Yeah.
Going there. The movie featured 3 members of the Cusack family in acting roles: father Dick Cusack, daughter Joan Cusack, and son John Cusack.
Yeah, I recognized John Cusack in a scene, but I didn't know who Dick Cusack was.
John Cusack was 15 at the time of filming, making him the youngest cast member.
Yeah. Lacey, have you seen Class?
I have seen Class. I was not supposed to see Class when I saw Class. I was probably 14-ish, maybe 15. It was an HBO, it was one of those when you had the thing where you could like push it down halfway and watch HBO.
Yeah.
Like, to try and not because, we were trying to steal HBO, but because my parents didn't have HBO at the time. And
we did similar things, but not for the HBO channel. It was another channel.
But yeah, I was definitely not supposed to see that when I was probably, I don't know, 13 or 14. And it was definitely more adult content than I was used to at the time. It was super funny. That was the beginning of my love of everything Rob Lowe and Andrew McCarthy. So yeah.
Gotcha. Kyle, have you seen Class?
I have. This is one of those movies. Obviously, Jacqueline Bisset is looking beautiful in this.
Oh, she was hot in this movie. Yeah.
Young Rob Lowe, young Andrew McCarthy. This is one of those films, though, that it just kind of falls in that 80s wayside of, there was a lot of movies like this at the time. And it's one of those ones that, unfortunately, I think has just been buried over time under some of the other films that were a little bit better than this.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it, to be honest with you guys, until I was doing the research for this year. I'd never heard of this film. Of course, keep in mind, I was the guy that didn't have HBO and the pay channels like everyone else did.
Just to throw it out there, if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about this movie, Bill Simmons, who was on The Ringer, about a year ago, interviewed Andrew McCarthy on his podcast, and they talked a lot about this film.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, guys. We're, of course, in the land of sequels. Next, we have Jaws 3D. The third dimension is terror, made over $42 million back in 1983. All new Jaws 3D. The giant 35-foot shark becomes trapped in a SeaWorld theme park, and it's up to the sons of Police Chief Brody to rescue everyone. Director Joe Alves stars Dennis Quaid, Bess Armstrong, Simon McCorkindale. Kyle, I know you got some trivia.
Well, first of all, this was Leah Thompson's feature film debut. So that's a plus in a movie of very few. But according to the book Roy Scheider, a film biography by Diane C. Kachmar, Scheider, who starred in the first 2 Jaws movies, once said, "Mephistopheles couldn't talk me into doing it. they knew better to even ask. Reportedly, Schneider agreed to make Blue Thunder in 1983 to ensure that he was definitely and contractually unavailable for this film. Schneider had made Jaws 2 reluctantly due to a contract issue with Universal Pictures where he owed the studio 2 films after withdrawing from The Deer Hunter. To get out of this situation, he opted to do Jaws 2, a movie on which he didn't want to work, in exchange for the studio releasing him from his contract.
I think we mentioned that when we talked about Blue Thunder in the previous podcast, which, by the way, I'm going to go on record and say Blue Thunder has not aged well and is not a good film. It was not as good as I remember it being.
The shark is said to be 35 feet long, despite budgetary restraints keeping the film from providing a true sense of scale for the creature, 10 feet longer than the previous films. This film made almost $13.5 million in its first weekend. It held the record for highest grossing opening of a 3D film until Spy Kids 3 Game Over in 2003 made $33.5 million.
Guys, I'll be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of the Jaws franchise. Not a big fan of the original Jaws. I know its impact in pop culture and was probably the first real summer blockbuster. I did see it. It did keep me out of the water for quite a long time. So not a big fan of the franchise. I did not see Jaws 3D. Kyle, have you seen Jaws 3D?
I remember I've seen Jaws 3D and it was on cable, so I didn't get the 3D effect. But I remember when it came out, how much they were hyping the 3D. This is when in the 80s when they were really trying to get 3D. About the same time we had Space Hunter 3D come out, a few other movies in 3D, but this was the big one. And I remember the concept of, Jaws in SeaWorld. And I'm like, no, I'm out. I love the original. I love the original Jaws. It's an all-time classic. It's easily up there as in probably my top 25 films. But anything after the first one, I try not to pretend it doesn't even exist. They hyped this big time. They played up on the 3D. It never really panned out for 3D at this go around, and this movie kind of just lives in infamy now.
Lacee, Jaws fan?
No, thank you. The funny thing is, I had never seen Jaws until I went to film school, and it was on the list of options that we could watch, and I tried it, and I was like 10 minutes, and I was like, no, I can't. I'm not a horror person. I don't like if I can't see it coming, I'm not. Nope. No, thank you.
You're out. Gotcha. I had a feeling.
Yeah. Nope.
All right, guys. The next film we have is a film I had never seen before, and it was nice to get into it. I actually found it on DVD, and this is Mr. Mom. Caroline's a rising executive. Jack just lost his job. Jack's going to have to start from the bottoms up. Mr. Mom. After he's suddenly laid off, a husband switches roles with his wife. She turns to the workforce and he becomes a stay-at-home dad. And he has to take care of 3 young children, a job he has no clue how to do. Directed Stan Dragoti. Writer is John Hughes. Of course, starring Michael Keaton, Terry Garr, Frederick Goller. Kyle, you've got some trivia.
And this is some interesting trivia, and I got something to ask you when we're done with this. Michael Keaton turned down Splash to do this movie. Ron Howard was asked to direct, but he turned it down in order to make Splash. This film was the first time Michael Keaton got top billing. When the premise came about, when John Hughes told Lauren Schuler Donner about a disastrous experience he had looking after his 2 children while his wife was away, Donner found it hilarious. Hughes asked if he could make a good movie, and Donner replied, "It sure sounds funny to me." Hughes wrote the film and flew to Los Angeles to rewrite the script with Donner. So I have a question for you guys real quick concerning this. I don't consider this an L that Michael Keaton didn't do Splash to do this movie, because this movie
you don't consider it a what? I'm sorry?
An L. He made a huge mistake turning down Splash. As big as Splash was, I think Splash is a different movie with Michael Keaton that may not be quite as successful. And I think this is one of those classic 80s comedies here. And I know this movie has a very strong cult following.
You know what? Okay, so I enjoyed A Night Shift more But this was a funny movie, especially there was like a funny what if dreams sequence, and where the hot neighbor girl is like kind of lusting after Michael Keaton. But I actually think if he did Splash, I still think it would have been a good movie. I still think it would have been popular. I could totally see him in that role. It might have been a little bit different, but I think it would have been still good and popular. What do you think, Lacee?
I think that I can see. This is gonna sound mean. I can see Michael Keaton in Tom Hanks's role from Splash. I can't see Tom Hanks in Mr. Mom. I think Michael Keaton has a delivery. His delivery on sarcasm and shock. He's just got that sardonic wit that is just. I think it would have been well received in Splash. It would have been a different movie, but it would have been really funny. Tom Hanks in Mr. Mom, Tom Hanks has that lovable thing going on, but he's not as sarcastic as much as he is like lovable, funny comedy. And I think that would have turned this into like kind of a squishy movie. And this is definitely not I feel like squishy is the right word. I don't know. Anyway, this movie was this and Batman are my two favorite Michael Keaton movies. I love him. The conversation he has on the doorstep when Martin Mull is waiting to take Terry Garr to work or whatever, when he's talking about construction, and Martin Mull asks if he's going to rewire the house at 220. He's like, 220, 221, whatever it takes.
So I have an interesting take on this. So I love Terry Garr. I've always been a big fan of hers. I actually like her story in this more than Michael Keaton being a single dad, because she's having to be the breadwinner basically, and she's in a male-dominated advertising type of job role, and you get to see her kind of make her steps higher and deal with all of that issue. What if it was called Mrs. Dad and Terry Garr was like, the lead in that? It just kind of came to me on that. I thought it was interesting.
They already said that movie was called Working Girl.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, in this though, you got the married couple, and I don't know. I just, she did take a back seat in this, but I found actually enjoying her scenes a lot more than his scenes being the bumbling father, although I did enjoy the poker nights with the girls. I thought those were funny, especially with the neighbor lady who is, having the hots for her and him being tempted and stuff like that. There's some funny moments there, but I just enjoyed Terry Garr in this movie a lot. I thought she was really good.
I think the between the scene I talked about a minute ago and the stuff in that very first little section where he does the carpool line wrong, and then the thing in the grocery store where it's like, Irv, I swear we weren't even on all 7. It's just
Kyle, do you have thoughts on Mr. Moon?
Doing it wrong.
I really enjoy this movie. What's funny is when you mentioned Terry Garr, I honestly believe at the time this movie came out, she was actually the bigger name than Michael Keaton. At that point, she was much more established than Michael Keaton. But there's some classic moments in this that I love. I love it when they're all at the company picnic and he ends up just about to beat Martin Mull, and then he like wises up and realizes, and the dream sequence is great. One of my favorite scenes, and I think it's one of the all-time classic scenes, is it's time to give up the whoopee.
Time to what? Sorry?
Give up the whoopee.
Give up the whoopee.
Yes. Kevin, do you still have yours?
My whoopee? What?
Yeah. Your whoopee.
Oh, the whoopee. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you said whoopee, and I realized you're referring to the whoopee, which was the blanket that the kid would not give up. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Time to give up the whoopee. Yes.
But no, I think this is one of those classic early 80s comedies, and it's still, I think it holds up well, and it's based more off of what I otherwise felt like too was that both Terry Garr and Michael Keaton both carried the weight in this film, and I think
I feel this is one of those films too that also was on a constant rotation of HBO and all those films.
Oh yeah, a big HBO film.
Yeah, I'd heard of it, but I'd never watched it until recently. But I did enjoy it though. All right, guys. Next we have Krull. Made about $16.5 million in the theater. Poster says, beyond our time, beyond our universe, there's a planet besieged by alien invaders, where a young king must rescue the love from the clutches of the beast or risk the death of his world. Krull, a world light years beyond your imagination. IMDb just says a prince and a fellowship of companions set out to rescue his bride from a fortress of alien invaders who have arrived on their home planet. Director Peter Yates stars Ken Marshall, Lysette Anthony, Freddie Jones, Liam Neeson, and Robbie Coltrane, the noted actors in this. Kyle, I know you've got us some trivia. What you got?
This movie has been notable for featuring early screen appearances of both Liam Neeson and Robbie Coltrane. 23 movie sets were constructed for filming. Princess Lysette Anthony's voice was dubbed in the final cut by Lindsay Krause. Robbie Coltrane's character's voice was fellow Brit Michael Elpick. The motion picture was one of the most expensively produced of its time. Several games were developed and released as a promotional tie-in, including 2 Parker Brothers games, a card game, and a board game. A home video game was developed for the Atari 5200 Super System, but because of low sales, it was changed to the Atari 2600 video game system. An arcade game, Krull 1983, was manufactured by D. Gottlieb and Company, a Columbia Pictures Industries Corporation company. Gottlieb also developed a Krull pinball game, but production was canceled. Only 10 completed test unit prototypes exist.
Kyle,
I just want to throw...
Hold on a sec, Kyle. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that Krull 1983 arcade game, one of the hardest arcade games ever.
To find or to play?
To play.
I don't ever remember seeing one in my time. I think it's a myth. I don't remember seeing the Krull arcade game. I
lost many quarters on that game.
So, Kyle, I want to ask you, of course, you know, this movie is famous for one particular thing. Please tell us what that is.
That would be one of the greatest weapons in fantasy movie history, the glaive.
Tell us your thoughts on the glaive, Kyle, because I have thoughts as well, and I want to get Lacee's.
I love the glaive. I love this movie. This movie is one of my favorite 80s fantasy films there's not even hesitation there. The problem with this movie, as great as the glaive is, they took the writers used the glaive and took it out like a punk, because this incredibly cool weapon with blades and has to throw it, it comes back to you, doesn't even manage. They explain how important it is, how powerful it is, yet he loses it. It doesn't even manage to take out the villain. It's and what happens to it in the end is just so incredibly frustrating and disappointing. It's one of the most heartbreaking things of weapons in the 80s.
Lacee, your thoughts on Krull and the glaive?
Well, it just kind of goes to show, I don't know. I feel like I remember seeing this movie a long time ago. I didn't do a rewatch for this podcast. I know I saw it, back in probably the late 80s. I remember thinking that he wasn't very good with the sword because he lost it. Like because I don't know. It just,
the sword or the glaive?
The glaive, whatever it's called. It's kind of it's not the plane, it's the pilot situation in my head. But again, I haven't seen it since like the late 80s. So
gotcha.
I don't really have a lot of memory of it.
I recently saw this film last year. I was a guest on my friend's podcast called the Action Film Face Off on the Long Box podcast network, where they pit 2 action movies together. And the 2 films that were pitted next to each other was this movie, Krull, and Big Trouble in Little China. And we had talked about this glaive weapon before, Kyle, because we featured it on one of our podcasts for Culture Clash, where we talked about famous movie weapons. And of course, this one was near the top. Now, this movie, the glaive is what everyone talks about because it looks so freaking cool. And you see it a lot on the packaging of this film, on the posters. And people have recreated it for prop versions of this. But after watching it again, I hadn't seen it in years. As you alluded to earlier, Kyle, this weapon, which looks so freaking cool is barely utilized in this film and is not utilized at all, and is actually a big disappointment. And rewatching it, it bummed me out, to be perfectly honest with you, and it knocked this movie down a few notches from what I remember how much I liked it. And it had some great sets, it had some great characters. The Lacee girl, beautiful, just wonderful, beautiful girl. But the way it wasn't used at all is a big disappointment, and I don't know the reason for that. I don't know why they didn't. He could have been flinging that thing around during their adventures of going through these hazardous locations, the fire horses, whatever they were, and all these other big enemies. Could have been flinging that thing around, using it like a 6-gun. No, and then at the end, like you said, Kyle, big disappointment.
And what's frustrating about it is, like you said, Kevin, this movie has such a cool aesthetic to it. The sets are beautiful. There's some
costumes are great. Yeah.
There's some the Cyclops is still some of the best makeup I've seen.
Great practical effects in this movie.
And I actually thought, you know what, Ken Marshall should have been a lot more than what he ended up being. And I know there's some stories behind that, but the Slayers were cool looking villains. When they would kill them and the thing would come out of their head. That was cool. There's so much that was so well done about this movie, and such a great fantasy movie. But that ending, and not only are you losing the glaive, but what they end up using to kill the main villain in the end is also one of the worst looking effects of all time. It's just like they just planned it and they ran out of money. And we gotta half-ass this. But
that's a good way to put it. It felt like they just lost some budget, and they're like, does he really need the glaive? I'm like, oh, dude. Anyway. All right, guys. Next movie, and I got a big question regarding this movie. National Lampoon's Vacation. At the time, in 1983, grossed over $61.5 million. Poster says, every summer, Chevy Chase takes his family on a little trip. This year, he went too far. National Lampoon's Vacation. The Griswolds' family cross-country drive to Wally World theme park proves to be much more arduous than ever anticipated. Directed by Harold Ramis, writer John Hughes, stars, of course, Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo. Kyle, what you got for some trivia?
All the cast members had terrible experiences when it came to filming the scenes inside Wally World, where they rode all of the roller coasters and other rides. In the commentary, Chevy Chase mentions that many of the rides made him and the other cast members vomit, especially since they all had to ride them several times for each take. Dana Barron mentioned in the commentary that the coasters made her so sick she had to take motion sickness pills and would pass out on nearby benches between takes. Finally, Anthony Michael Hall mentions that in the shots on the roller coaster where he looked scared, he wasn't acting. His fear in those shots was genuine. Originally, the producers wanted Christy Brinkley to appear naked in the film, but she refused. A compromise was reached where she stripped down to her bra and panties just before jumping in the pool with Clark. Momentary pause for mental picture. Okay, we can move on now. John Candy was paid $1 million for his brief appearance at the end of the movie.
What a payday. Can you imagine that?
Yep.
Sorry, folks. Wally World's closed. Give me my million.
The original ending in which the Griswolds hold Roy Wally and his family hostage in their house was recreated as part of the ending to National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
All right. Lacey, your thoughts on Vacation?
I love the Vacation series. I know that everyone thinks that the first one was the best one, and then they all kind of went downhill from there, but I love all of them. I think they're all really fun. I do love that they kind of switched up the kids each time, kind of as a tradition. I think I saw I want to say I saw European Vacation before I saw the first one, because the first one was rated R and I was 10. So I want to say I probably saw European Vacation before I saw this one. But I have since rectified that situation, and I love it. It's fun and awesome and hilarious. I think the scene where Anthony Michael Hall and Chevy Chase share a beer, where he just kind of downs it. Yeah, that's funny. Anyway,
Kyle, your thoughts on National Lampoon's Vacation?
Well, first of all, I have to say I have got to be more thankful to my parents for allowing me to watch the things they let me watch at ages I was probably way too early to see some of these
Mhm.
things, but they helped develop my love for movies, so I thank them. This is a classic. This this and Fletch were the roles I think that defines Chevy Chase more in the '80s than pretty much anything. Um, I think there is an argument though that Christmas Vacation might be the best of the vacation films. I'm just going to throw that out there. But this one is a classic. Um, I can remember watching it for the first time and watching the rides at Wally World, going, I'm betting those aren't the best quality controlled rides out there. And I think they filmed this at, I think Wally World was a Six Flags or something at the time, and that was right shortly thereafter. Six Flags got pegged pretty hard for park safety. So, but no, I mean it's a classic '80s comedy. It's a classic '80s cast. I mean Beverly D'Angelo, Chevy Chase, John Candy, young Anthony Michael Hall. Obviously, Christy Brinkley, who was a superstar in her own right, and will always be known to many a pubescent boy as the girl in the Ferrari.
Uptown Girl. Yeah. This movie is a classic, especially popularizing the road trip movies, and stuff going wrong with them, of course. And I like how the car is like a character in this movie as well. And even though the remake that they did, Vacation, although Chevy Chase was in it, they kind of upped the car and the weird stuff that happens to it. That was the funniest thing about that film, was the car itself in the remake. But I got to tell you though, guys, and some people agree, some people don't agree, that I think that Christmas Vacation is the better of the vacation films. I remember the European Vacation. I've seen it once, I think, maybe twice. I remember the Vegas one. But I think the Christmas Vacation is my favorite, and I think is the best. Your thoughts, Kyle?
Oh, I said it earlier. I think there's an argument that the Christmas Vacation is the best of the vacation franchise, and I mean it's one of those ones where I think it's just a matter of preference. I personally I think I lean towards Christmas Vacation because it's just the adding the Christmas holiday hijinks, and it makes it that much more fun. But I mean, Vacation is still an all-time classic.
Lacey, what do you say? Which one do you prefer?
Yes. I love the Christmas Vacation film. Wasn't that the first one that wasn't National Lampoon's, I think?
Yeah, I don't believe that was.
Yeah, and but I will say that I worked on a film in 2001 where I was like a background actor in the mountains up above LA, and Randy Quaid was like the only name actor on the film, directed by John McTiernan. Who knew? But it was great because at the end of each shot, instead of saying moving on or next setup, everyone would scream "shitters full," like shitters. Until Randy Quaid showed up on set. After that, no one said it because I don't know. I don't know, but it was fun and crazy, and he was a very nice man before he went crazy. And
Yeah, I was gonna say 2001 would definitely be before the mental break that he had.
Yeah, he was super sweet. Like talked to everybody. But yeah, it was a super fun little movie.
All right, guys. The next film is Private School. The poster says, "Once you're in, you've got it made." Made a little over $14 million back in 1983. Chris from a girls' boarding school loves Jim from a nearby boys' boarding school. Jordan also wants Jim and plays dirty. Jim and his two friends visit the girls' school posing as girls. Directed by Noah Black, stars Phoebe Cates, Betsy Russell, and Matthew Modine. Kyle, I know you've got some trivia.
Several of Rick Springfield's band members play the band at the school dance early in the movie. Betsy Russell said that filming her topless scene on horseback wasn't easy. It was out in the open in a huge pasture with several people around watching. It was a weird feeling flashing out there in the middle of a field on horseback, she said in an interview. It was a freezing day and I caught cold. Debut of cinema movie debut as a choreographer of Paula Abdul, who choreographed the women's aerobic workout. And actress Phoebe Cates got more of her talent on this movie because not only was she a top billed actor, but she was a performer for the film soundtrack, singing 2 songs, "How Do I Let You Know" and "Just One Touch," the latter in a duet with Bill Ray.
All right, guys, as I suggested, and I mentioned earlier in the podcast, that this 83 was the year of the sex comedies. Porky's, of course, starting it last year, the year before. And they were obviously probably cheap to produce. And I got to say, as I mentioned earlier, I think this is the best one of this year. We'll go forward and bring a few others up, but we've mentioned some of the other ones before. But this one I've always liked. Of course, I'm a little biased because of Phoebe Cates and how beautiful she is and how cute she is in this film. I love that her and Matthew Modine are characters in this. And there's some tropes in there. There's like, the guy that's the friend that's sex crazy. And of course, breaking into the girls' school, and some shenanigans that are going there. Of course, there's the other trope of the female shower scene as well for that gentleman as well. But it's a fun movie as well. It's funny. I enjoy this for many reasons. Kyle, your thoughts on Private School?
Obviously, as you mentioned, you have a little Phoebe Cates bias in your opinion of this movie, but that's quite all right. This is one of the standout 83 sex comedies. I don't know if it's the number one. It depends on how you define a movie we'll be talking about later in this year. But so this is an enjoyable film. Phoebe Cates, obviously stunning and beautiful, and this one hits all the right marks to be one of the better sex comedies of the early 80s, and it definitely stands out.
Lacee, I don't know if you know this, but Kyle and I are guys, so we're kind of a little biased with this film.
Are you sure?
So I did want to get a lady's thoughts here on Private School. Have you seen Private School?
I have. I remember seeing it a while back. I mean, obviously it wasn't when I was 10, but I want to say that I was doing like a Matthew Modine deep dive, because I feel like I saw this and Vision Quest on the same weekend or something. I remember it being kind of it kind of felt like it came somewhere between like Little Darlings and Zapped is kind of where the feel is, but with the female point of view.
Right.
So I like the fact that they had female point of view as a good percentage of the film, as opposed to Porky's and some of the other ones that are just like 5 dudes, looking for tail or whatever. So it was good. It was fun. It was what it was.
So I wanted to mention that one of her friends in the film is Betsy, and she's played by Kathleen Wilhoit. And she's always like the best friend. She got kind of typecast best friend. You also saw her as one of the friends or waitresses in Roadhouse. She was the girl that was singing one of the songs with the Jeff Healey band. And she's rocking the full 80s mullet in this. I actually really liked her in this movie. She's the one that kind of flirts with like the other friend that's kind of like the chubby guy that's kind of sex star, but they kind of have a little thing together, a little crush on each other. But she is like an instigator in this film. She's the one that like rips off the top of the girl that had to go bareback riding, basically. And she does some other pranks as well. She's she has that face. But I did want to mention too that she is also born in Santa Barbara, California, in my hometown where I'm actually recording from. So she is from here as well. And she is a singer herself. She was a backup choir with the Carpenters. She did sing with them as well. So she does have a singing background. But I liked her in this film. I thought she kind of stole her scenes that she would sing. All right, guys, the last film that we were discussing about in July of 1983 for Here of Time Warp is Space Raiders. Now, this film, as I was watching it, reminded me of another film, and we'll get into that in a second here. I found it streaming, I believe, on Tubi for free, so I did watch it. I didn't expect much from it. The poster says he's 10 years old and they've taken him 10 million miles into space. The IMDb plot synopsis says a futuristic, sensitive tale of adventure and confrontation when a 10-year-old boy is accidentally kidnapped by a space filled with a motley crew of space pirates. Directed by Howard Cohen, writer Howard Cohen, stars Vince Edwards, David Mendenhall, and Patsy Peace. Kyle, what is your trivia?
So a majority of the sets in this movie have been used in previous films made by New World Pictures. This was 11-year-old David Mendenhall's theatrical film debut. The music score was made up of re-edited cues from James Horner's scores for Battle Beyond the Stars and Humanoids from the Deep. The movie was originally going to be released alongside Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. It ended up being released 2 months later. Most of the ships are from Battle Beyond the Stars.
There you go.
Yep. I actually remember seeing this movie when I was younger and thinking, what, they made a sequel to Battle Beyond the Stars or something along the lines. Oh, wait, isn't this Battle Beyond the Stars? I don't remember Battle Beyond the Stars with this, but they stole so much from so many other things to make this movie. It's one of those, like, it's a deja vu effect film.
The young kid, David Mendenhall, is probably best known for playing the son of Sylvester Stallone in Over the Top. He was also in 87 episodes of General Hospital, and he was the voice of Daniel Witwicky in Transformers. The movie came out in 86. I was trying to remember like where I'd seen him before. But yeah. Okay, Kyle, you obviously have seen this film. I watched it just recently. It's fresh in my mind. It is pretty cheesy. But you know, and the effects were pretty cheesy, and it looked familiar because a lot of the stuff was from other films. It was okay. What were your thoughts and memories of Space Raiders?
This was basically one of those films. They just basically duct taped a bunch of stuff from other films, threw it out there. We're gonna capitalize and try to make a little money off of Jedi Overflow, and yeah, it's one of those bad B type movies in the aspect of this. If you're a young kid and you love outer space and sci-fi at the time, you probably watch this, but yeah, this isn't something you're gonna. I don't even remember it in the theaters. I know I saw this was an HBO. Catch it sometime and go, why does that seem so familiar?
Lacey, have you seen Space Raiders?
I remember seeing it like a million years ago, and I remember thinking at the time that it felt like the Flight of the Navigator, like if you actually saw what happened to the kid while he was gone before he came back, and that was the Ice Pirates. So it was like Ice Pirates meets Flight of the Navigator, but with not so great special effects. I mean,
but there was no space herpes in this movie.
So. No space herpes.
Ice Pirates call out. Thank you, Kyle.
Right, but it had just that kind of like ragtag crew thing where nobody really wanted to be there, kind of a. But then I don't know. That's what I remember from a million years ago. So, but I haven't rewatched it because it was not great the first time.
Oh, I mean,
you know,
come on. This movie was made by the man who could probably make a movie off of $10 and a thing of string and duct tape, and that is the great Roger Corman.
Yes.
Oh gosh. All right, guys. That is it for the movies of July of 1983. We didn't have anything for the cutting room floor, but we did want to mention the top grossing movies here of 1983. And a few of these films did crack the top 10. And those movies are, I don't know if we have any guesses here, guys. You want to take any guesses?
Well, Staying Alive, we even mentioned that in the
Mr.
episode.
Mom.
Yeah, Staying Alive came in at number 8 with almost $65 million. And just under that is Mr. Mom, neck and neck at number 9 at almost $65 million as well. They're just a few $100,000 separating those two from the 8 and 9 o'clock spot there, guys. All right, guys. So next podcast, of course, we've been talking about July of 1983. And we're going to be discussing, I think, August and September next time. And some of the movies we're going to talk about, well, let me see here. I've got Risky Business, Star Chamber, Cujo, The Curse of the Pink Panther, the Man Who Wasn't There. We've got Smokey and the Bandit 3, Strange Brew, Easy Money. And I just picked this one up for the first time. I'm going to watch it, and that's Maelstrom in 3D. We'll see how that looks. The Hunter, Fire and Ice, among others, and on Hercules, the Lou Ferrigno version as well, and obviously others as well. But I want to ask the big question for you guys. Hey, Lacee, I'm going to start with you. Any of these movies you would consider watching that you haven't seen? I mean, anything, or did you see most of these? I guess
I'm looking at the list. I think I saw all of them except for Staying Alive, and I mean, while I've never really been interested in it, you seem to think that it's like super fantastic. So I might have to go back and watch it. Or at least the first 5 to 7 minutes of it. I didn't see Jaws 3D, which I'm not going to watch.
Gotcha.
But I might, sorry, I had to kind of scroll back through. I might try Staying Alive.
Yeah, try Staying Alive, because I think,
70%.
honestly, I think a lot of people haven't gone to revisit it. And
Yes,
obviously it made a lot of money in 83.
Well, do I have to have because I honestly, I know I saw the original, like I saw Saturday Night Fever, but I have no recollection. I mean, I'm just very little. Do
I didn't go back and rewatch it because I'd seen it a few years earlier and it was fresh in my mind. But no, because I think in a way it stands on its own.
Okay.
Yeah, just give it a shot. It's streaming for free somewhere. I just can't remember.
Maybe. All right. I'll think on it. What
about you, Kyle? Is there anything that jumps out at you?
I think the only thing on this list that I didn't see was the Deadly Force with Wings Hauser.
Yeah.
So if I come across that, I might give it a check out. But I mean, for the most part, these are all have their moment or a classic. This is a very solid list. Even Space Raiders, which that's something, if you just come across it, it's worth watching for a few minutes to check it out. You get a little nostalgia from some of the other things it pulls from. But yeah. I mean, I think this is a really good representation of 80s films, especially of the early 80s.
Yeah, I agree. All right, guys. Well, this is the Fandom Podcast Network, and of course, if you're watching the video on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel, we appreciate that. Please subscribe, get notifications. If you're listening to this, please, thank you for listening, but also check out the video on YouTube. We'd appreciate that. You can see all the posters from these movies that we were discussing. Yes, again, check us out on YouTube. And also our master feed for all of our audio podcasts can be found on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. And you can also stream and download it on the Podbean app. And please check us out on all of your podcast catchers, including Apple Podcast, iTunes. Fandom Podcast Network is also on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram and Twitter. My name is Kevin. I am on Twitter, Instagram, and now Threads at Spartan_Phoenix. Kyle, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram or Threads under AKyleFandom.
All
right. Lacee, where can we find you on social media, if any, or are you still hiding under a rock?
I'm not hiding. I don't think I'm very interesting. I don't post anything. I do kind of like every once in a while like repost a meme or something, but I'm not an active. I'm a very poor example of social media presence. I'll just say that. If you want to try and follow me, I'm not super exciting, but Lacee Pants on Facebook and Twitter, and the Lacee Pants on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, again, I know.
Don't expect much, guys. I'm not trying to be. Yeah.
Well, I was giving a shout out to our friend Jen earlier, because you and Jen are going to be joining me on a very special Couch Potato Theater on an Adam Sandler film, which I'm not going to mention right now, but you guys all know. But we will be doing an Adam Sandler career retrospective, talking about his films and then talking about one of his films, of course, as well. So stay tuned for that. Of course, Lacee and Kyle will be back for the next episode of Time Warp 1983. Please give us a review wherever that is allowed on your podcast catchers. We appreciate that. Also, check out our TeePublic store. You can buy a Time Warp t-shirt as well. Again, thank you guys for checking out us here on the Fandom Podcast Network on Time Warp, our Fandom Flashback Show. This has been 1983, July, 40th Anniversary Movies and Pop Culture, Part 4. Lacee, thank you again so much for joining us. Looking forward to seeing you next time.
Hooray. I'm glad to be here now. I'm glad to be back.
Awesome. Kyle, again, thank you as always for joining us here on Time Warp.
It's always a pleasure to be here, but I really need to go get myself ready for the next part because we're talking about risky business, which means we're talking about Rebecca De Mornay and risky business. I need time for prep on that.
Yes, it is time to revisit that classic. All right, guys. Until next time, we'll see you for part 5, discussing the movies and pop culture of August and September. Thank you for joining us here on the Fandom Podcast Network for Time Warp 1983.